Hi, this is Tom, and you are listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Getting to Third Space is produced by Tenacious Change, a consultancy committed to creating resilient, nonprofit organizations. This podcast is available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. Wherever you listen to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom, be sure to subscribe to hear about new episodes when they become available. Also, be sure to share this podcast with friends, colleagues, and family. The more people join us, the quicker we get to third space as a society. Good afternoon, Lamar. How you doing?
Hey, doing great. How you doing, Tom?
Well, I'm doing okay. What's been happening in your world?
You're not going to believe this. If I was to ask you, what is the one task, I should say, at my home that I've been working on forever that is left incomplete?
Well, I know it's siding. You've been siding your house.
I've been
for the last 5 years.
So I think maybe I decided to side one side a year.
Okay.
But
it's too bad you live in a house with 8 sides.
So I had a friend of mine come over for 3 days. We finally put the last couple of windows in, and we put the last piece of siding on at 11:45 this morning, and went out and had lunch and celebrated. So yeah, The siding is complete.
Happy dance, happy dance, happy dance. Oh yeah. My gosh.
And
congratulations.
Thank you. Why did I choose to do it myself? I don't know, but I could.
You could, and by golly, you did. Well,
yeah, I did.
Congratulations. Well, my life has not been as nearly exciting as that. I came down with a real significant cold about a week ago.
Oh man.
And I just feel like I'm just finally kind of returning to some level of normal. Throughout the entire pandemic, I was not sick.
But you didn't go anywhere either.
I didn't have flu. Yeah. I didn't have COVID. And so you get hit with a cold now and you think you're dying. I mean, it just, it just feels like that, So yeah, I'm on the rebound. I'm truly on the rebound now. And I know we were actually going to record last week, but we were both a little bit under the weather. And I'm glad we postponed it to this week because I really am feeling a whole lot better. So,
well, it's good to be back and good to have you back then.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Right.
I'm so happy your siding's done too. Very, me too. Very happy.
Me too.
So what are we going to talk about today?
You know what? I think we've been building kind of this framework about how do we talk about difficult subjects, right? We've given a little bit of that. We know that there are challenges for a lot of people to have this conversation, barriers perhaps that keep us from having the conversations that may be uncomfortable but are really important, whether it's with our family, our friends, or maybe in a larger situation. Certainly, when we take a look at politically, we know that those conversations are very difficult. So, but I'll reduce that all the way down to you and me at home with our family, with our friends, in where we spend our time. It's important to get an idea of what is it makes it easier or more difficult to have very important conversations.
As we've talked in preparation for this, we recognize that there's a lot of different barriers. Some of them are actually internal barriers. And so that's where we're going to start this week, is we're going to talk a little bit about some of the internal barriers that we face. And I guess, what are these? I guess they're kind of like maybe mindsets or attitudes that we hold or beliefs that we hold about ourselves and interaction with other people that sometimes get in the way of making it easier for us to really engage with somebody, particularly when we know that they may not agree with us. Is that a good way to say that, or do you?
I certainly think that that's part of it. Attitude and beliefs that we hold. I think also that within all of us, there's a little bit of fear when it comes to having these kinds of conversations with people that we care about, or even people that we're working with. Um, Maybe a little bit of the unknown, or a little bit of insecurity, maybe not feeling like I'm tooled up well enough or not, for such a conversation. Um, so that there are some barriers that maybe have a little bit more to do with kind of a heightened level of emotion or anxiety.
As we were thinking about this, you really kind of just mentioned one of those, which is this anxiety that we have, or maybe the discomfort we have of kind of holding that between us and another person, that fear that maybe that there is there's something we're going to talk about, or there's some interaction we're going to have that represents something that we're not morally or ethically or even personally comfortable with, and so we may fear that what that feels like to us when that comes up. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And in addition to that, um, that maybe we're not, we have this kind of underlying anxiety about how this might turn out or how it might go. There's a bit of another side to that, and I think that we haven't talked about this so much, but I think that it's important to realize that not everything needs to come on the table. I think we need to choose wisely, um, about what it is we do want to talk about, and be prepared in that conversation. Remember, as we talked about last time, be prepared to listen, to learn, to understand, but also realize it doesn't have to be a dump of everything we need to put on the table right now to sort through. So kind of being wise in choosing the time, the place, and kind of the topic we're going to talk about.
Is that a little bit like kind of the need to be in control of the conversation?
Maybe, yeah, I can see that for sure.
That could be an element of it, because we might go into the conversation feeling like we have to control this because of that anxiety and fear we feel, or feeling like if we don't resolve everything here right now, it won't get resolved, so we try to put everything on the table.
If you're doing that, Tom, to me, I could respond by shutting down. If that's threatening to me, or if that's not the direction I want, I could shut down. The other side of that is I can begin to feel threatened and push back. And so once we have that going on, we've talked about this before, maybe we need to talk about it some more, is we lose really the direction of what our goal is. And that's to learn and listen.
Well, and the other thing that it might trigger is another worry that we sometimes have, another one of those internal barriers that we might have, which is the anxiety or fear or worry actually we have about violence, or and not even physical violence so much as, will this devolve into a shouting match? Will this devolve into a disagreement that includes verbal and emotional violence, maybe the threat of physical violence?
Tom, where do you think that I agree, but where do you think that comes from? Why do we have that fear?
Why do we have that fear?
Let, I've asked that question, let you ponder it a bit. My concern is, my thought is that we've had experiences and we've had role models, um, that we have seen or experienced that have taken us down that road in the past.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, each of us, none of us knows what personal life the other has lived, and what their background is, and what their own traumas have been. There's also a societal level of violence that we've become more tolerant of it. And there's been much more violent rhetoric that has been used, in the last few years. That I find myself, I live just outside of Baltimore and D.C., so I turn on the news at night, and the first thing that's on, well, there were 3 people shot here, there were 2 people shot there was a person knifed over here. That's the headlines of the local news, and after a while, you almost become accepting of that level of violence that exists in your world around you.
So from real physical violence to emotional violence, which is also very real, and just feeling threatened. And that can happen in a lot of ways. And we'll get into this maybe in another podcast coming up, is some of that interpersonal communication that really can stop a good conversation that may elicit feelings of threat and violence.
Yeah, I think that will be a really good and useful conversation for us to have. Um, Not just for the folks listening out there, but just as reminders to us of how we engage with people at an interpersonal level.
Have you had experience where you've been part of important conversations, whether it's working with groups, working with people or individuals or couples on important in an important process where that fear has raised itself? Is that something you've experienced, Tom?
Actually, it is, but in a slightly different context. As you know, I spent a number of years doing teen pregnancy prevention work, and I developed a program that we replicated around the country. And one of our first replication sites, I participated in a community meeting. It wasn't supposed to be a community meeting. It was supposed to be a meeting of the curriculum committee at the school, and it turned out to be about 175 people sitting in the auditorium. And I did a 15-minute presentation and then just opened it up for questions. And there were some very hostile comments that came from that group. And the meeting finally ended when one man stood up and screamed at me from the back of the auditorium and challenged me. And fortunately, the meeting ended, but on my way out, I was accosted by another person who got right in my face and screamed at me. I was physically run into by a person that scattered everything that I was carrying all over the place. And that night I drove home. It was about 193 miles home. I remember that exactly because the entire time I think I watched in my rearview mirror to see if I was and you know, Lamar, I got to tell you, it was months before I slept decently at night. That shook me to my core.
Understandably, I think again that's just a good reminder that we don't know. I mean, I've never heard that story from you. We don't know what people bring to the communication, to the conversation. We don't know what might be a trigger, how someone might respond. And so this whole concept of just being in that conversation and aware of the interpersonal dynamics is so important when we're talking about tough stuff.
So turnabout is fair play. Have you ever had that experience like that? Something that shook you to the core?
Yeah. So the last 11 years of my career, working career, was in as a director of human resources in a manufacturing company of somewhere in the 750 employee range, and had to have multiple difficult conversations sometimes about a person's behavior, a person's employment, and that impacts people's lives, the livelihood. Um, and yes, I mean, in my situation, having to let somebody go because of a behavior that they had that was quite inappropriate and not okay in the workplace, and not only offensive but could be dangerous to others. Um, and the person just coming unglued. Now, we had a policy and a process, which I'm very thankful for, having a security available to walk that person out. But I had a very similar response for the next, I don't know how long it was. It was several days afterwards. I scanned the parking lot before I walked out, um, made sure I was parking near the door. When I drove into the parking lot to work, I scanned the parking lot before I got out. It was just one of those things where I didn't trust the level of anger that the person had exhibited towards me. A difficult conversation that was impacting his life in an incredibly difficult way. But with this time and this place, you just I just wasn't sure, that I should not be looking what's behind my back. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's fair to say we've both really had those experiences where we felt like we had to do that scanning and we had to keep checking to make sure, all was good. Well, wow. Well, at the risk of going down rabbit holes we didn't intend to go down.
Yeah, we did do that, did we? Okay.
Yeah, we did just a little bit. So let's so we've talked about three, at least three, internal barriers: this desire to be in control, our discomfort or fear of the differences we may experience with another person, and then even the worry about it escalating into a more violent kind of situation. But so let's think about the checks against these internal barriers. How is it we need to be thinking to prepare ourselves internally for those more challenging conversations. So we came up with four. We may throw in a fifth or sixth along the way. God only knows when we do this. I mean, whatever strikes us, right? But I think that actually, I think I'll do the first one, and you take the next one because I seem to remember when we were prepping, you talked a little bit more about that second one, and I'm still trying to get my head around it just a little bit here. So the first one is check your motivation. Ask yourself some very basic questions about why you're going into that conversation. Are you going into the conversation to listen and to learn and to hear the other person? Or is your motivation to convert someone to your position or to strengthen your position? I mean, so many times, I've experienced this in my career. You have in your career. We'll go to these seminars and that on how to change people's thinking or how to engage people in a way to get them to come along the way you want them to go. And those things, those kinds of sales techniques seem to be the kind of thing that we grab onto fairly easily. And we begin to think about that engagement with the other person as an opportunity to change their thinking. But maybe that's not the opportunity. Maybe the opportunity is, or the motivation needs to be that we are coming into that conversation to listen and to hear and to learn, with the possibility that it's not they that change, but maybe we adjust some of our thinking. So I think that first thing is really check your motivation. Why are you having this conversation? Looking for a convert, or are you there to listen and pay attention to what's being said?
Yeah, and I think in addition to looking for a convert, I think that there are uh, some who would approach a difficult um, conversation not as a conversation really, but as a platform, and it's it's I have this vision in my mind of a meeting that I was to about a year ago. Okay. And so a gentleman comes into the meeting, and we're talking in this group, we were talking about some very difficult things about working together and being part of a community together. And the person came in with a very clear agenda, a one item agenda, stood up with resources in his hands, demanding that we all listen to his perspective, which we did. Um, and then he sat down without wanting to hear or interact about what other people were responding to him in a very thoughtful ways. It was almost like, don't challenge me. You know, I had my platform. I laid it out for you. You know, talk away, but don't challenge me. so, uh, so check your motivation. Why are we having the conversations in the first place?
Yeah, I got to tell you though, that reminded me of a governor's task force I sat on back in my home state of Iowa, right? In which it was a fatherhood task force, and the committee met, and there was this very powerful legislator that was appointed to sit on the committee, but he never came except one day. He came in and he sat down and he said, "Well, this is what needs to happen." Da 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 da. And he got up and he started to leave because he was just going to pronounce what was going to happen, right? And there was some pushback. Let's just put it that way. There was some pushback, and he did not get his way because he didn't realize he was dealing with a group of people that they had some expertise too, and they were not shy.
But actually, Tom, that leads us into the second one. The second point is be focused on we more than me. This is a tough one because we I often will, have rehearsed my position or my thought or had conversations about what's important to me prior to even having the difficult ones that we're setting up for. And so it's easy to get into that checking my motivation concern and going into the conversation where it's about me and it's not about we. This is so difficult for some folks when the we it becomes about who they identify as the most important people rather than we being encompassing. This is golly, how do I talk about this without putting hot buttons out there? So, I recently I talked with. I talked with a friend of mine, actually the guy who was helping me do my citing, who's on the library board here in town. And so I asked him, I said, "Hey, have you had any concerns or situations or whatever come up about restricting access to the material?" And he goes, "No, we haven't." And he goes, "We have adopted the position that parents and families are responsible for what their other family members are checking out and reading. And when someone checks something out, there's information sent to the parents, all of that. There's some accountability built in." I thought, okay. So what they were saying is, hey, as a group, as a library, we're going to manage the way we feel is important to manage data, information, books, resources, etc. You have responsibility as well, but we're taking care of the we. I liked that answer from him in that it's important that we are concerned about the people, but when I'm relating my position, I need to think about how he or she or they are impacted by what I'm saying. And that means I have to understand and do the listening when they've taken what I've said and feed it back to me. Because that's the only way I know, really, how what I'm saying is impacting them. So communication has to be a process. It can't be the guy coming in the room and saying, "This is how it's going to happen."
Not at all. Not at all. Well, a third check that we can offer to folks as against some of those internal barriers to civil conversation is to find a way to grow comfortable interacting with people who don't share your ideas, opinions, or experiences. And you know, as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about how I have tried to do this in my life. And so what I have found myself doing at times is intentionally going into settings that are unfamiliar to me, and and hanging out with people that I might not typically hang out with, and realizing that when I go into those settings, um, I'm at a disadvantage. I don't know the stories. I don't know the inside jokes. I don't know the things that are considered appropriate or inappropriate. I'm just going to kind of fumble my way through, and and uh, and in that way, I've developed a certain comfort level in being in those spaces. And it took some time. It really did take some time. I mean, and there are still some places that is kind of hard for me to go into. If there's an issue going on that I feel very, very strongly about, maybe the worst thing that I can do is go into a setting where I know that there's a whole bunch of people that hold that feeling just as the opposite feeling just as strongly as I hold the feeling that I have. That could possibly be a formula for disaster, you know? So I might be really cautious about that. But at the same time, if I'm meeting one on one with somebody, I would really want to be able to feel comfortable doing so. And part of that practice is just taking myself into places that I'm not familiar. I'm not at home. Does that make some sense?
No, it does. And, I think going into some of the places that I was thinking of for myself, uh, I mean, it was important, great experiences, but boy, was it difficult to do. But I think of another way that this is applied. I think about staying in relationship with people who maybe definitely don't share my ideas or my beliefs. Um, I think the very first episode I talked about my own family, my brothers, where I learned that, hey, we're not on the same page when it comes to political and some religious conversations. That was a big eye opening for me. But can I, for example, stay in relationship and be, you know, uh, social and be part of a community with people that I don't agree with? Um, I That's something that I have always found important. It's it's uncomfortable sometimes, um, because I know sometimes people might identify me differently because of maybe who I'm with or what meeting I'm at or whatever it could be. I'm just a curious person by nature. That's part of my what I find helpful for me, but also I find problematic sometimes. Is I'm very curious about things. But if I'm socially connecting with, or I'm in a community connecting with people that I don't agree with, I think that's important for us to grow comfortable interacting with those individuals, and that allow them to know me, and 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 that I think makes these conversations, should we have them, with these individuals, more productive, because they know it's not some guy in a blue shirt who's going to just rant and rave about his political, his religious, his philosophical beliefs that I just don't want my kids to hear. You know, it's Lamar, someone that I've trusted and known and had sat down and had dinner with, that we're talking about very personal things and become more vulnerable in those conversations.
Yeah. I really like how you're framing that because I've been standing here thinking about the relationships that I have, and I have relationships with people that are in a different political party than I'm in. Long-standing relationships. I have people that are in different religious faiths than I'm in. I have relationships with people that are different from me in so many different ways. I actually have an extremely diverse group of friends and acquaintances, and all of those differences, are potential sources of conflict. But somehow we have learned to be in relationship with one another despite those things.
So let me ask you this question about what you just said, because I think it's really, really important. I don't want to lose this. Where you're at now in your comfortableness, in your broad, in your worldview, maybe is another way to say that, compared to when I knew you, um, just out of high school. What has how have those relationships impacted you?
Well, I was at a very different place, as you know, right out of high school, and so I think that what those other relationships have done for me is that they have really enriched my lives in ways that I would never have imagined. In terms of cross cultural experiences, whether that is food, whether it is music, whether it is games, and interests. It's really enriched my life. None of those have been threatening to me at all. And you've been here where we live. We live across the street from a mosque, and many of our neighbors are Muslim. We live in a majority minority county, and so there is just an amazing diversity in the neighborhood in which I live, and the friendships I have are really nice, and it's been really enriching to my life. I can't imagine what I would how I would feel today if my world had stayed that small.
So growing comfortable is a process.
It's a process. Sometimes it's a lifelong process, right?
This is sometimes just like, and I knew that about you. I'm glad you were able to share that, Tom, because I knew that having an opportunity to taking the risks to get to know people and moving outside of our experience early on and listening and learning changes us. And we have an opportunity whether we accept that change or not. That's okay. But we've exposed ourselves to other thoughts and other ways of understanding life. And so growing comfortable is important. We probably ought to move on to the last one we have here.
Yeah, we probably should. And so you go ahead and take that one. I'm going to bail out on you here and let you take that one.
Well, interesting enough, the last point that we had talked about was giving yourself permission to bail out. And I don't think this is something that I would recommend doing quickly without much thought, because I think if you check your motivation on the front end, um, and have worked on the comfortableness, being comfortable with people who maybe we don't agree with, uh, giving yourself a permission to bail out, I think you always have the ability to say, okay, I got to step away from this. My my encouragement is always though to remember you can re-engage. But before you engage, make sure you internally have said, I can bail out if it just gets to be too much. You know, it if I have to have another conversation, difficult conversation with someone where I may feel physically threatened, I may bail because I don't have that job anymore. I may bail out a lot quicker and say, yeah, let me just take a step away and let's come back to this conversation again. There, it's a lot like just knowing that we can push a pause button. I don't see bailing out. In fact, bailing out may be a strong term. I don't see bailing out as a withdraw from the potential conversation, but I would say it's more of a timeout. I'm not ready to go down that road. It, be honest and open about that. But give yourself permission to say, I'm not committed to having to go down the road as far as I may have gone otherwise.
Always, we need to give ourselves that permission just to hit the pause button. I'm not ignoring this. I'm not going to say we can't ever talk about this again. I'm just saying that right now I need to pause because I got some things to process, and I can come back and do this the next time with a fresher perspective and maybe a different way of looking at it.
So, we've looked at basically three barriers, and there are more. We're going to bring more conversation to the table on barriers. Um, the need to be in control, discomfort or fear of differences, worrying about violence. Those are some things we need to probably visit again. But then we talked about internal guidelines. Um, checking your motivation. Is it more about me or is it more about we? Getting comfortable, interact with people who don't share our opinions or our experiences, and then lastly, giving ourselves permission to bail out. Next time, I think we want to look for some additional guidelines to having a civil conversation and maybe being able to put some things into play.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I think that's the direction we need to go in episode 4. Which when will that be happening? Who knows? No.
Hey, I got my siding on my house. I'm a little freer, and you're healthy, so
you're ready to go. Well,
yeah.
Hey, we're gonna wrap up today. I think with a couple of bear stories.
And we did not plan on both having bear stories.
No. But so Lamar and I, we look for these things that just tickle our funny bone, right?
Yeah.
And so this week it just happened to be bear stories. So Lamar, you want to go first?
Sure. So to set this up a little bit, Congress maybe has had a little trouble getting their act together. We don't need to go
No.
down that road right now. But a few weeks back, right, they were just hours away from shutting down the government, right? And at that particular time, there was a really, really important contest going on in Alaska that I became aware of about a year ago and found it to be a lot of fun. But it was a popularity contest about bears and who was the fattest bear. And so they have these cameras set up on the rivers because this is the time of the year that bears are fattening up for hibernation, right? They're eating the fish, they're as much protein and fat as they can get, and so the people are watching these cameras, and then and the bears are named and tagged, and so they know what bears they're looking at, and they're trying to vote for the fattest bear. In this case, fat is a good thing. That gets them ready for hibernation, being able to sustain themselves through that long winter. And there have been a series of consistent winners over time, got to tell you. But this year, there was a bear by the name of Grazer, appropriate, right? Grazer, who beat Chunk.
Beat Chunk?
Beat Chunk in popularity. Grazer, Chunk got 23,134 votes. But
Okay.
Grazer got 108,321 votes to win the fattest bear contest.
Oh my goodness!
Got to tell you, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Grazer and probably Chunk too.
Yeah.
From a distance.
Well, we will put the website into the show notes so people can take a look at Grazer and Chunk for themselves and see if they agree with the decision. So yeah, I was following the fat bear contest a little bit too, but I got I'm easily distracted, and and I was distracted by another bear story, which comes out of Canada,
Yeah.
and it's about this bear that walks into a gas station. Now I know that sounds like the opening line of a joke, right?
Yeah.
Well, this bear actually walks into this gas station. They have it all on camera and we'll put this in the show notes too, so you can see it for yourself. The bear walks into the gas station, and he walks right by the counter where there's a man working, and the man is ducked down behind the counter just not to startle the bear or whatever. And the bear, he's very purposeful. He's not like looking around going, what can I eat? What can I destroy? He is very purposeful. He walks to this cabinet where they have set up there a bowl of gummy bears. And he reaches in and he grabs a 70-cent bag of gummy bears, and then he walks out of the store again. Gummy bears. So this raises the question for me. Is that considered cannibalism? I'm just wondering here. I'm just wondering. So,
and just took one bag.
Yeah, just one bag. Just one. So he's not going to get fat.
He's not going to win the fat bear contest. No. That's for sure. But here's what I want. Wouldn't it be great if maybe those who are listening to this podcast come up with some other endings to their story about the bear who walks into the gas station?
Oh, yeah, that would be fun.
And maybe says, we'll see what people's creative spirit is encouraging them to say.
On Spotify, we can put little quizzes up. And so I'll see if I can set up a quiz. A bear walks into a gas station and
yeah, there we go.
And tell us what you think he does. So, well, hey, Lamar, we've probably, we're probably done, huh?
Okay.
I think the Bears have done it.
All
So,
right. Well, listen, it's been a good conversation. I would encourage people to join us again next time. You'll if you've subscribed, you'll get a note when we drop the podcast,
yep.
and we will be moving into some of those interpersonal kinds of things that we talked about today. And we've also we're continuing to develop some possible interviews coming up here in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds
Okay.
good.
All
All
right.
right, Lamar, have a great week. Talk to you soon.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.
Lamar here. Thank you for listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Remember to click on subscribe to be sure you get notices about new episodes. Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom is a production of Tenacious Change. Opinions and ideas expressed in this podcast are solely those of Lamar Roth and Tom Klaus. And we'd like to hear your opinions and ideas too. You can leave us a voice message on Spotify, or you can email us at the addresses found in the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you can find links to some of the things we talk about today, so you can check them out yourself. Until next time, keep moving toward third space.